Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's so good to have you. Welcome to Relationship Matters LiveCast. We do this every Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And however, if you are watching now and you're wondering, oh, I wish I could have had a friend watch this. It's okay. You can, because you can share the video when it's done. It'll stay on YouTube on Evergreen. It'll stay on my Relationship Matters wall. You can always scroll and find it again. And started last week, we're starting to do a podcast version. So it'll be released in podcast next Monday. And so that you can then just take it on the go and have this conversation. I'm excited about today because if you've been watching at all, you know that for me, all things relationship, right? Like, I think it's so important. The reason I started this live cast is because relationships are central to everything. And it doesn't matter what you do, where you are, everything flows out of relationship. And so we talk on this show about relationships at work, at home, in organizations, all different places. And so depending on the week and who the guest is, we will have all different types of conversations. And they've been so rich. If you haven't had a chance to watch some of them or to listen to some of them, you can go to Spotify or any podcast platform and you can just punch in Relationship Matters and my name, Mark Gordon, and you'll find it. It'll find you. And the thing is some of those conversations have been so rich and they're so good. And I'm super excited about today's conversation. So I want to introduce to you Dr. Dawn Kier. And now she is a fantastic friend. I'll tell you a little more after, but here's her bio because you need to know. But let me tell you, if you've got friends, invite them to come watch right now or to share this video or share the video. You can even share the live on your Facebook if you're on Facebook with your Facebook page, because then other people can see it. But you're going to want to listen in on this conversation, especially if you lead an organization or are in a management role. All right. So Dr. Dawn Kier is the founder and chief culture officer of New Dawn Consulting. I love that name. And she's been doing it since 2009, and that's amazing. She develops, maintains, and grows client relationships through leading project teams from planning through execution. She provides HR services and consults with business leaders in increasing effectiveness and reducing costs associated with HR delivery through improved processes and execution. Drives HR and organizational change by enabling effectiveness throughout the people segments of the business, because the people are the greatest assets, right? So New Dawn Consulting aligns people to the heart of the organization. We do this by addressing 3 hot buttons: human resource strategy, processes, practices, and organizational alignment, culture, change, talent management, and development acquisition. At the core, I love this, we are a group of organizational leadership and human resources professionals gifted at all things people, changing the world one heart, one person, one heart, one team, one organization at a time. And it's interesting because, Dawn, you are known as the heart doctor because you get to the heart of the organization, you get to the heart of the people, and you pull out what's in their hearts. And I just love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. So welcome, Dr. Dawn. That's what we even put heart doctor on there. I love it. I'm so happy to have you on. Dawn and I met, just for the guests that are watching, we met a few years ago at a training for family life, and she's from Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm from Kelowna, British Columbia. What are the chances you and I would meet in this world?
I know.
And we just hit it off right away because
immediately.
Like-mindedness, right? Like you would say things and I was like mind blown, in the training, or you'd ask just the right question. And so we started conversing. And so we've actually had regular or semi-regular anyway, when we can, interaction with each other. Never really even worked together, but we've been on a couple of these together.
I think that day will come.
That day will come.
That day will come.
It's got to come.
Absolutely.
Oh, man. So I want to let everybody know, if you have questions or you have statements or you want to add to this is a conversation. And yes, it's only Dr. Dawn and I on the video, but we want your questions. We want your comments in the comment section, regardless of where you're watching from, because you can contribute to the conversation and you can ask questions, and that will bring out deeper things out of us. And so I really want to encourage you to ask as many questions. I noticed already Bill Holden said greetings. Looking forward to this. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, appreciate that. Bill's a faithful follower and watches this quite often, almost every week. So I really appreciate you, Bill. And so, Dawn, let's just dive into this. Your area of specialty is really helping organizations live out their beliefs, live out their values and so that the cultures, there's alignment. I like that word in your bio. It's like you help bring alignment to the organization. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that looks like in your world?
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting. We focus on organizations, but then we focus on the people who are in those organizations.
Right.
So we find that a lot of times there is a discrepancy between who we say we want to be and who we actually are.
Yeah.
Right. And so we can say, hey, here are our values that are listed on the wall, but here's what we actually live out. And there's a delta there. And so what we do is we work with organizations to figure out, like, who are you? Who do you want to be? How do you know when you get there? And what are the behaviors that support you in that?
Right.
And as simple as those questions may sound, it sometimes takes organizations years, because it takes those in senior leadership a while to truly get heart aligned with who they say they want to be.
Right.
Yeah, I had one client who we were doing his values and working through and preparing, and he had this aha epiphany moment, and he said, I think I care more about my clients than I do about my family.
Wow.
And so we just sat there, and I was like, well, what do you want to do with that? And so he had a value about relationships that came out. And so it was just an interesting space of, it wasn't that he didn't love his family, but he felt secure with what he already developed with his family. So the external relationships were more important. And so, great, let's say who we are and be that intentionally.
Right.
Yeah. We never get credit for our silent intentions.
Yeah. And I think that at the heart of that is integrity, is when, you know, I liken it like this. If we have an integrity gap, it's when there's a gap between who we say we are and who we actually are, or say we're going to do and actually do. And the more that gap kind of opens up, we get the integrity gap there. And it makes it hard for people to follow then, because they see the gap and they're kind of wondering, like, what do we do with that gap?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what's interesting that you say that, because with each and every one of us, even my own values, I'm going to miss the mark.
Yes.
Some days I'm not going to live out, and I've got a value of humility, and someday my inner nasty is going to come out. And so that's just going to happen. So it's not when we violate our very own values, as long as we don't stay there, we acknowledge it, and then we invite people to speak into it, then there's a bit more integrity, and there's not the expectation of perfection. Rather, this is a journey of who we are and who we're becoming.
So true. I love that, Dawn, because that's true, right? If we can be transparent and say, you know what, I blew it, because nobody can be perfect. Like, and if you're looking for a perfect organization, there isn't one.
It's kind of like saying, if you're looking for a perfect church, well, the minute that you join it, it's no longer perfect.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. And so, you know, we got to be aware of that people are going to make mistakes. Their leaders are not always going to live up to those values. Yeah. I said it to you before the show here, just like I've been saying a lot, like, how do we help people take the values from the wall to the heart? of the people.
Mm.
And that is so important. And I think that in a family, how do we take the values that we have for family and have them written in our children's hearts? How do we have them written in our hearts? Well, the best way to do that is by modeling it and then being transparent when we blow it. I really like that concept. It's not about perfection. I think sometimes actually organizational leaders can actually violate the values by trying
Yep,
to protect them,
that is correct. That is
right?
correct.
You must
And
see
they're
that.
all the time. And so before we get to that violation, because Big, I'm just going to take a little quick note over here.
Yes.
You said something about how do we get them into the heart? And for everyone who is listening, you know what's fascinating is the Lord had the same challenge. And so if God himself wrote on the very tablets of our heart and we still cut up, well,
Yeah.
I think we've got to figure out there's going to be a little bit of a delta. So what do we do?
Right.
And so likewise, in our walk with the Lord, likewise in our walk in organizations, whether it's our values in our family, it's to almost go in with, okay, what do we do when we violate them? And
Right.
so there's a thought out there, and I'll give you the technical term and then I'll explain what it means,
Yeah, please.
of espoused values. So this is who we say we want to be, and lived values. And the lived values, it's who we actually are. This is what we're actually living out.
Right.
And so to translate the two between espoused and lived, we actually go through a process. And so that first is to sit with the values and identify what are all the roles that you play in your life. And we have leaders of organizations do this as well. What are all the roles? Because sometimes my values make sense for me as a mom, but maybe does that still make sense for me as a pastor? Does it make sense for me as an entrepreneur? Does it make sense for me as a daughter and as a sister? All the roles I play. So we have them list out all their roles first. And then we take them through, like, what's most important now? And so when you talked about the violation of the values, sometimes we've created values that don't make sense for us now.
Right.
And so every major life change, your values will shift. So say, for instance, before you met your sweetheart, you may have valued one thing. After you met her and got married, now you value something else.
Right.
And then after children, you value something else, and so on and so forth. So at each life stage, your values will shift. And so what we encourage is, let's look at the values, how they're defined, and does that make sense for you now?
Wow.
And then what are the behaviors that go along with it?
That's so powerful. And I think you just hit on something there, Dawn. I think that's so important is what are the behaviors that align with it? I don't think we think about that. I think sometimes we conceptualize about it, but we don't really actually look at the details. Like so in my role as a father, if my value is honor, what am I doing to honor my children? What am I doing to honor? So if it's in a work setting, if I'm leading an organization, which I have done, if the values of the organization are kindness, what does that kindness look like for me as the leader? Because I still have an organization to run. I still have to have expectations for results. I still need people to perform. And to be honest, I've struggled with that in the past where it's hard to hold people accountable because of a value that's in the way of wanting to be kind or wanting to be, not hurting people, wanting to be loving, and yet the question became for me is, am I actually loving them if I'm letting them get away with stuff that I know they could do better in? And so that took me down a whole road of looking what accountability is and all that. But I'm just saying, so I love what you said because yes, look at it from the point of view of right now and the role that you're applying it to, because it could even change. My values as a dad might be a little different than my values as a CEO. And so I need to look at that and align or adjust, right? Now, I want it to be mostly the same,
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. Keep going.
So interesting. So you used a term and you talked about honoring. What is fascinating, what we have our clients do and organizations is we actually have them define the value. So one of my values is
Oh,
love. But when I say love, it may mean one thing to me. If you say love, it might mean something else.
right,
So we give what's called a vivid description. What does this really mean? What is it? What is it not? Did you like
right.
that? That's bad English, but it works. So
Yeah.
this is not what it is, and this is
Yeah.
what it is. So that it's really clear. Another thing is that with values, they should be clearly observable.
Hmm.
They're
Yeah.
observable. Yeah. So what's crazy? Elvis Presley, Elvis. He had this
Elvis.
quote that Elvis, that
He
values
was
lead
all
to
shook
us.
up.
He was shook up. But what his quote was is that values are like fingerprints and that they leave a mark everywhere you go. And what's
Wow.
fascinating about that is that they do, whether expressed or not.
Yes.
And so if they're silent, then one, people can violate them. If they're silent, we can violate them because we're not held accountable to them. And so then they're just on the wall and they're not in our hearts.
Wow. So powerful. I would also say that if you don't speak them but you show them, they can be on the positive side, right? And I love that. This is really good. Gary Chupik just said core
Hey, Gary.
practice. Yeah, core practices you must practice then right.
Yes, you absolutely have to practice them. And so otherwise, they just become static. It becomes lip
Right.
service. And as I like to say, we don't get credit for what we don't share. We
Ha,
don't get credit. So, how would anyone know that we are living a values based life if we don't share it, if we don't actively practice it and make decisions toward it? Because
wow.
values are your guardrails and they
Yeah.
help you to make decisions. So, if you're in a conversation, and I think you mentioned kindness, so how you approach a workplace performance disciplinary conversation, you'll lead with the value of kindness. So
Right.
that means that you're going to honor the person above the offense or the mistake that's just been made. And you'll
Right.
figure out how to have this conversation to leave the individual whole so that at the end they're in full choice and then they feel well served, well respected, and they have a choice of what to do with the actual performance. We won't fuse identity and performance behavior
Right.
together because you're
Uh,
leading with kindness. So it helps you to be able to live that out in your decisions, your conversations.
yeah. Oh man, that's so good, Don. Um, I wonder. Um, okay. Well, first of all, I mean, corporate America, Canada, whatever, totally needs you. So, so with COVID,
Oh
with
boy.
COVID, we have
Mm,
a lot of people call it the reset, the great resignation, the whatever.
yep.
I've
Oh
actually
man.
called it the great revealer because I
Hello.
really believe that it revealed some of the underneath surface stuff in organizations and families that were there all along that nobody wanted to
Yeah.
address, recognize, whatever, toxicity just kind of growing like mold. And COVID unveiled it.
Hmm.
And I always say, people say that, when you go through a hard time, that it builds character. But I've always said it reveals character, so you know what to
Oh
work
yeah.
on, right? So
Yeah.
we could talk about that. What have you seen in terms of how what's been revealed? I
Mm,
think has been that very thing you're talking about is that people have not practiced their values, and a lot of people don't even know what they are anymore. I think there's such a chaos because of the social media and everything else. People they've lost their identity. So if you lose your identity, you lose your values, right? So
you
where do we
do.
start to rebuild that?
Mm. So go back to those core questions, right?
Yeah.
It's the who am I? What's important to me? Where am I headed? And then how do you know when you get there?
Hmm.
And it's interesting, this great resignation gave people an opportunity to pause. It just gave
Right.
an opportunity to pause. And something fascinating happens when we pause. We get a chance to think.
Yeah.
And when we get a chance to think, then we can consider all the things that we hadn't been considering when we were running at such a fast pace.
Right.
But here's something that I may be in a boat a little bit by myself on this. There is this great resignation that's out there, and COVID did reveal a lot. But what I would say is that the thought of job satisfaction, the thought of turnover, how to create engagement, how to create healthy cultures, those things have been in play, gosh, for decades.
Right.
For decades. I believe that COVID gave us a reason to talk about it.
Right.
And to do something about it.
Right.
You know, there's this fascinating statistic, and it is a statistic that's here in the United States. I'm not sure what it is in Canada, but it is out of 10 employees, 8 out of 10 are actively disengaged.
Wow.
8 out of 10.
Wow.
And that's a study by a company called Gallup. And that number has been like that for the last 5 years.
Wow.
So that tells me that there's something that's happening in the hearts of people at work that independent of pandemic, that independent of life circumstances, there's a gap that's happening on the inside. There's lots of different theories out there as to how to fix it. But there is this one that I'd like to submit in just for our listeners because it's kind of cool.
Throw it out. Throw it in there.
Throw this thing. It's something that's called, so don't do an internet Google search, because if you do a Google search, they're going to give you some Google answers.
Yeah.
But if you do...
Just share this video. You don't have to Google anything. Just share this video.
You crack me up. You're funny. Yeah. So there's a term out there, and it really started to gain popularity in 2009, but it's called workplace spirituality. Now, interesting enough, when I first heard this term of workplace spirituality and how it relates to organizational values and how it just relates to values, I thought, oh, okay, this is bringing God into the workplace. It actually has nothing to do with religion. Okay. Zilch, nothing. It says people need 3 things to truly be satisfied. They need to have meaningful work and understand their purpose. I mean, so simple. The second is that they have to have a sense of belonging or connectedness. And the third is that they're part of a community. That's it.
Wow.
Sounds so simple. It does. But in that simplicity, think about how many at work are actively disengaged because, does my boss like me? Do I want to be here? Do I have a friend at work? Gosh,
am I making a difference?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And interesting, even though we like to say cash is king, just like money doesn't buy you love, money doesn't buy you retention in an organization either.
Right.
It's the relationships.
Wow.
Because relationships matter.
Thank you. Yes. Relationship matters. Oh. I believe that 100%. That's why I do what I do. Yeah, that's so good. By simplifying it, Dawn, it empowers people because those 3 things, now all we got to do is take them and then define them and say, what does this mean to us? Absolutely. And now we have a clear value chart that we could write on the wall of the heart of the people. If they're disengaged, it's because those needs aren't being met. So any organization, whether it's nonprofit, profit, whatever, any family can apply that principle, those 3 things to the environment and the culture, and they're going to see success. People are going to be more engaged. They're going to feel like they have purpose, making a difference. They have community that they can call on. Because in the old, like I'm in a couple of mastermind groups, and one of them is a business one. And, I come in there and talk about relationship stuff and whatnot. They draw on me sometimes. And it's like, they're kind of like, well, we're not supposed to have close relationships at work. Isn't that supposed to be separate? And I think that this idea that we have to separate everything and compartmentalize everything is probably part of the problem.
It absolutely is, because we're human beings. We're not human doings.
Right.
And we want to be with one another. Even the most introverted thinking, still there's this this human connection that's needed. And what's
Yeah.
interesting, when we think about just meaning at work, like, why am I here? Is this just a job? Is it just a paycheck? It's really incumbent upon that person's leader
Right.
to ask the question. And
Yeah.
so if you think about how things were in the 80s, ooh, I'm starting to date myself, and in the 90s, early 2000s, we run in organizations at a rapid pace, right?
Yeah.
And it's get the thing done. And we're
Yeah.
going after the thing and we're driving for results. But if we stop and have the human conversation,
Mm.
and if we use relationships to drive results, wow, we get so much more traction
Yeah.
versus trying to get results the other
I
way.
I literally today I had that conversation with a client talking
Wow.
about their children. I said, you've got to move from this, from the disciplinarian to the connector and the
Mm,
coach. You want to be the
yeah.
coach now because they're getting older. So you want to become the coach now. You want to have connection. Like I always say, connect before you direct. And
Come
so
on.
in an organization, you want to do that as well, not just
Hmm.
families, but yeah, that's what you're saying. Hey, I got Gary said, "Hey Don, great to see you. Do you think this uh, think the misalignment of our own core values results in self-induced personal stress?"
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing. I don't believe that anybody wakes up in the morning and says, how can I miss the mark?
yeah,
I just don't think that we do. But when we're not living in
right.
line with who we say we are and who we want to be, yes, that creates stress and anxiety. It's like me trying to wear your glasses or put your beard on. That's
Yeah,
not me. And
yeah.
so it's going to be hard for me to walk that out because that's not me.
But it's
And so,
interesting, isn't it
yeah,
interesting though, Don, like with social media, because I was just when you said that, I was thinking, well, we could probably apply a filter here and actually give you my beard and give like because now you can do that with TikTok or whatever they
yeah, you
are.
can.
Yeah, but like I'm wondering if social media you can actually it is actually training, I think of neuroplasticity. There it's actually training kids' brains to be something they're not because they can
Hmm.
have this persona projected and be something completely different behind the scenes. And I'm wondering if that hasn't affected us societally and even organizationally, because lots of HR departments say, well, we hired one person and got another. It's because you're always
Absolutely.
going to put your own, your best out forward. But
Put your
I just wondered, like,
representative
how
in
much
the
do you
interview.
think? Yeah, like how much do you think that influences this misalignment of values?
Yeah, that's a great question. And gosh, I almost wanted to go off into a sermon topic, but we're not going to do that today. I think about the second part, which is having a sense of belonging,
Yeah,
right? And so when you have the filtered life, there is a projection of wanting to belong. And that's normal. We all want
yeah,
to belong. Family constructs are extremely important because we want to belong. Our our relationships are extremely important. We want to belong and we need a safe place to belong. And
right,
so when that belonging is threatened, then what comes out? Is it the core of us or is it the defensive part of us?
right,
And that misalignment can happen really fast because at the core of who we choose to be may not be how we show up.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great divide
yeah.
on the inside.
Yeah, yeah, and quite often, like when we do, let's say we have one of those bad days where we're not aligned, and maybe we get angry and that
Hmm.
defensiveness comes up. I've always said, rather than beating yourself up for it, see it as an opportunity to look at what's beneath the surface. Why did
Yep.
that come up? If
Yeah,
my core value is this, why did I allow that to pop up? Well, all it means is that there's some misalignment in there somewhere. There's something that I'm holding on to or something that has affected that core value because intellectually, emotionally, every way I want to be a person of honor, but when I got angry, I wasn't. So
that's
it
right.
gives you an invitation. Well, why in that instant? What was it that I did that I needed to look at a little deeper? So it's actually an
Absolutely.
invitation to go deeper into your own self-awareness.
Absolutely. So we call it triggers,
Yeah,
right? There's triggers, and if they've been revealed, it's my belief that it's with intention to heal if we can do the hard work.
right.
And so, kind of investigating it, kind of with the head, and then taking it deep into the heart and figuring out where I was triggered. Was there a wound that's present?
Mm-hmm.
Was there an old wound that got triggered?
Yeah.
You can ask yourself, what am I afraid of?
Yeah.
Right? Or is there a lie that I'm believing?
Right.
Or what story am I telling myself that caused me to show up this way?
Right. Right.
Yeah. And
Now,
somehow answering, yeah.
Yeah. So how do we take that into the corporate world and or organizational level where there's, there's results that are needed, the efficiencies,
Mm-hmm.
things that you talk about. How does that work?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I have this little thing. It's called As If. It was the old Valley Girl,
Okay.
California in me. I say as if. And so it's actually an acronym that teaches people how to interrogate the thought. And so the first is, what are the assumptions that we're operating on based on this, whatever that trigger was in the workplace? And then the second is, what's the story that I'm telling myself? And then what are the intentions that you have for yourself towards the other person? And then finally is dealing with the feelings, because it did produce a feeling. And so we want to acknowledge the feeling, but then also, how do we want the person to feel after we've come forward to share these things? So that's what we use in the workplace.
I think we're come on back in.
I can hear you.
Hey,
All right.
are we back? Oh, I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
yes, but you sound like a
Oh,
character in a movie, because it's going, "Are you back?" So it sounds
there.
really slow. Hey, I just saw you move.
I think we're back.
All
I
right,
don't know
but your
what.
voice sounds like
Is it
something
still
in a
bad?
movie still.
It does. Yeah, okay. It
Yeah.
doesn't on my end. I don't. Oh, how's that? Is that better? Testing, testing. Oh boy.
I don't know if you can hear me, but you're a little pixelated and your voice sounds like it is in Star Wars.
Yeah. Uh,
All right, here we go.
all right, there we go. Oh boy. How's that?
Well, I can see you, but the voice is still dragging and
Still
dragging.
dragging. Come on. Come on. I'm moving.
I think it's a conspiracy because we were about to get into some stuff.
Oh man. Were we ever? Are we still am I still drowning there a little bit? Any better? Well, well, well. Isn't this fun? Technical difficulties. Sounds better, Bill says. Sounds a little better. Anyway, can you hear me, Dawn, other than the slow? Because I'll let you do the talking because you're coming through clear.
I am not sure what you just said. Did you just say, can you hear me? And is it slow? All right. Want to use technology?
There we go. I sent you a text.
Okay. Oh, I talk because I sound good. Okay. Well, I can just talk.
Yeah, go.
I'm not quite sure where we were at, but we were talking about how do you use this in the workplace. Did you already hear me talk about the as if and how to start to go through that?
You
Yes,
just
no?
started.
All right. This is what I call improvising at its finest. Okay, perfect. So just started. So as if is an acronym, and what we find is that at the heart of any values, cultural work, there's usually some type of conflict between what we perceive and what actually is happening. And all of that is based on our lens. So we give a way to be able to interrogate those thoughts by using an acronym. And so when there is a workplace trigger, say for instance, your boss talked to you in a certain way, and I like to say you felt some kind of way about it, right? It didn't sit right with you. So then you can start going through some of the questions. So, what was the action that took place? And then from there, what did you want to take place? And then from there, you can say, all right, so that's the A, and you're dealing all with actions. You're also dealing with assumptions in this A. So, what did you assume they were intending towards you? What was that assumption?
Hmm.
Then we move to the S. What's the story? What's the story that you're telling yourself? What is that personal narrative that is running in the background? Because depending upon the story that we tell ourselves or the narrative, that could shape very much how we receive that action. So if we felt that our boss was very snappy and maybe they just delegated something super quick in passing to a meeting, we could say, oh my gosh, they're angry at me.
Right.
Oh my goodness, they're very angry. Well, is it that they're angry? Is that the story I'm telling myself? Or is there another perspective that's available? And to put this in real life, I was meeting with someone who is so gifted and talented and creative. And I said, in 2 years, you should launch a business and step out there. You know, it's the entrepreneur in me. And so I'm talking about all these great things that she could do with all this talent she has. And she shared with me, she said, I spent a whole day asking myself, was I not doing a good job at work because you said that? And I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
And so she had to interrogate her own thoughts to figure out, what is this insecurity that was happening underneath the surface? And she said, and then I recognized, no, you're an entrepreneur. And so you were actually recognizing and affirming the gifts inside of me, but I took it as you may want somebody else to sit in the seat.
Right.
And I said, well, this opens up great dialogue. Like, right. So we have to look at what's the story we're telling ourselves.
Yeah.
The next part of as if is the I, which is the intention. And in my humble opinion, I believe this is where everything hinges, because we can assume intention based on people's actions, but we don't know their private thoughts.
Right.
So unless we ask the question, how do we know what their intentions are?
Yeah.
And we have self-confirming narratives because we look at patterns of behavior. Oh, they did this and this and this, and they did this before, and da-da-da. So I know. But unless we ask the question, gosh, now we've just made an assumption on their behalf. So we have to ask the question and allow them to ask. And the last piece that we like to consider is the F, which is the feeling. How do you want the person to feel about themselves after you bring this up? How do you want them to feel about you? And what do you want from the relationship?
Right.
And at work, so gosh, what do you want from your boss? How do you want your boss to feel about you? How do you want to feel about your boss? And that can be the impetus to have the conversation. And all this comes from have the conversation.
Yeah.
You gotta have the conversation at work. So a lot of times we just don't have those conversations. We're moving too fast to stop to have the human element.
Yeah.
Which means then we don't find that we have meaning at work. We don't find that we have a sense of belonging. We don't feel like we have community. And so then we get disengaged.
Right. Yeah. As I always say, can you hear me now, by the way? Am I sounding better? Maybe I'm not.
Can you type it in the chat and then I can figure it out? We'll just improvise.
It's so weird because it's showing like I've got enough on my end, but it's not working.
I could not make that out, whatever that just was.
Okay. So sorry everybody about this. I don't know who, if you maybe others can hear both of us. I don't know how to fix this.
Yeah, maybe we can open it up to whoever is listening and they can type in their questions and we can let it be free consulting hour. Let's go.
Oh man, I just want to fix this. I just want to fix it. How is that? Is that any better?
No.
Wow.
I think I heard you say, is this a little bit better?
Yeah.
But it sounds like, is it a little better?
Yeah, because it's funny because it sounds good on my end and it's showing me I've got full bars here, but for whatever reason you can't hear me. I'm not sure.
I think I just made out for whatever reason, but all the rest of it was jambalaya. I didn't get it.
This is frustrating for sure. It's hard to have a conversation when you can't hear the other person. We're having a good example of bad communication when one can't hear the other. I don't know what to do. Oh, I have one idea.
All right. That looks like a common sign language for wait one moment. And so we have nothing but time, so we can wait.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
No.
Is that any better?
I read your lips to say, was that better? But
oh my goodness.
Yeah. Now you're completely frozen, but at least it's not frozen on a bad face. It is completely frozen.
And I don't think that's going to be any better either.
Did you say it's a bad video?
I don't know what to do.
Well, would you, and I can't tell if there's any questions that are populating in the chat or not, but happy to field questions. I'm going to move to them and see. All right. Bill says that it's sounding better. Now you're completely frozen, and it's not frozen on the best face, there, friend. That's a serious face you have.
How's that? Any better? Better?
I think I heard or read your lips to say, how's that? Pause, better? Hey, your video doesn't look pixelated now, so that's good. Oh,
I know. I don't know why my voice is. It doesn't make any sense.
All right. Well, maybe what we can do is we can reschedule and come back on, and yeah, maybe we can even solicit some
Is that better?
questions ahead of time from those
Now I
who
can't
are
hear you.
listening.
Check, check, check. Well, I don't know what to do.
Well,
I
I say we don't suffer.
I can't hear you now.
Is my mic muted?
And it doesn't say you're muted.
Okay, perfect. It just says now the host has
Can't hear
unmuted
you.
my mic.
Can't hear you.
You can't hear me? All right. Well, that's bad technical problems. I'll type. Are you able to hear me?
Oh, is that, can you hear me now? No, I can't hear you. You can't hear me.
Oh, I
Okay.
think there's some comments in the chat.
Check. Oh, I know what.